It was supposed to be an ordinary day. A boy walking home, minding his own business, when suddenly things took a shocking turn. Out of nowhere, a police officer pulled over, claiming the boy looked suspicious. The situation escalated quickly. Voices raised, confusion filled the air, and before anyone could process what was happening, pepper spray was involved. The boy, barely able to see or breathe, cried out for help. What the officer didn't know: this boy wasn't just anyone. He was the son of someone with significant authority. And in just a few moments, everything was about to change. Who is the boy's father? Why did this confrontation happen in the first place? And how will this unexpected twist end? Stick around to see how one careless decision unraveled in ways no one saw coming. As the officer stood there, watching the boy struggle with the stinging sensation in his eyes, neighbors started to gather, whispering among themselves. Nobody knew exactly what had happened, but they could tell something wasn't right. The boy, trying to catch his breath, managed to blurt out a few words, but the officer wasn't listening. He was focused on keeping control of the situation, unaware of the bigger problem heading his way. Minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up to the scene, and out stepped a tall man with a calm but commanding presence. The crowd fell silent, recognizing him immediately. This wasn't just any father coming to check on his son. It was the chief of police. His eyes locked onto the officer, who was still unaware of who he had just confronted. What would happen next? Would the officer realize the gravity of his mistake? Or had things already gone too far? The chief of police calmly approached his son, crouching down to check if he was okay. His face remained composed, but anyone paying attention could sense the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. The boy whispered something to his father, and though no one could hear what was said, it was clear that things were about to escalate. Meanwhile, the officer, still unaware of who he was dealing with, continued to defend his actions, insisting he was only doing his job. From the crowd, whispers grew louder. Some were concerned for the boy, while others questioned if the officer had gone too far. A few pulled out their phones, quietly recording the scene, knowing this encounter would leave an impact far beyond this quiet street. Then another patrol car arrived. The tension thickened as more officers stepped out, glancing nervously at the chief. Everyone wondered, would justice be served, or would things spiral further out of control? The chief of police stood up slowly, his eyes fixed on the officer. The crowd grew quiet, sensing that something big was about to happen. The officer finally noticed the concerned looks of his fellow officers who had just arrived. He glanced back at the chief, confusion flickering across his face. That's when it hit him. This wasn't just any angry parent. His heart pounded as the realization set in. But before he could speak, the chief addressed the crowd. In a calm but firm voice, he asked everyone to remain patient while the situation was handled. There was something unnerving about how composed he was. The officer, now visibly nervous, began stammering explanations, trying to justify what had happened. The chief didn't respond right away. Instead, he turned to his son, gently asking again if he was okay. With tension hanging in the air like a thick cloud, everyone waited, wondering how far this moment would go before everything unraveled. Just when it seemed like the chief was about to take control of the situation, a voice cut through the tense silence. "Wait, there's been a mistake." A woman from the crowd stepped forward, nervously clutching her phone. She explained that she had seen the entire incident unfold from her front porch and had recorded it. The officer's face paled as the woman held up her phone, offering to show what really happened. The chief gave a slight nod, and she handed the phone to one of the newly arrived officers. A group gathered around to watch the video, while the rest of the crowd anxiously waited. The officer who had used the pepper spray stood rigid, sweat beginning to form on his brow as his colleagues reviewed the footage. With each passing second, tension mounted. As whispers spread through the gathering crowd, it became clear that this wasn't just about one officer's actions anymore. It was turning into something much larger, a moment that could spark outrage or demand accountability on a wider scale. As the officers finished watching the video, they exchanged uneasy glances. The recording clearly showed the boy walking peacefully down the street when the officer pulled over and began questioning him aggressively. There had been no reason for the situation to escalate, and the use of pepper spray was completely unwarranted. The crowd murmured in growing frustration, sensing that the officer's actions were unjustified. The chief, still calm but with a steely edge in his voice, turned to the officer. "You didn't just make a mistake, you crossed a line. You failed to protect and serve, and now you'll have to answer for it." The officer looked down, realizing there was no way out. His fellow officers quietly moved to escort him away. Just when it seemed like everything had been resolved, the chief surprised everyone by addressing the crowd. "This isn't just about today. It's about making sure something like this doesn't happen again to anyone." His words carried weight, leaving the crowd thoughtful and somber. The boy, still shaken but comforted by his father's presence, glanced up and managed a small smile. The day had started with fear, but it ended with hope. A powerful reminder that accountability matters and change begins with moments like this. With the officer taken away and the crowd slowly dispersing, there was a sense that something important had just happened. People whispered to each other about what they had witnessed, a powerful example of how quickly things could go wrong and how critical it was to hold those in power accountable. The chief, still standing beside his son, thanked the woman who had shared the video, knowing her bravery helped prevent a greater injustice. Before leaving, the chief turned to his son, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You did nothing wrong. Never forget that." The boy nodded, feeling a mix of relief and pride. As they walked away, the tension of the day began to fade, replaced by a quiet resolve. This story wasn't just about a father and his son. It was about trust, fairness, and the need for change. And for everyone who watched, it served as a reminder that even in moments of conflict, doing the right thing matters.